This film is about the positive impacts of communication, impact of public consumption of mobile communication and virtual reality. So the impact of people buying mobile cellular phones, mobile photographic devices is amongst what is referred to here. Importance of IT, information technology / virtual reality, and its continued technological growth when reflecting on major social issues and major moments in history. It's obvious that cars, airplanes, radio, and TV could have affected how wars were conducted in ancient times. There's no point in going into what could have happened during wars that occurred 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago. This presentation starts with a timeline of some of the biggest genocide and social tragedies just before, during, and after World War II. We're going to acknowledge a huge number of historical studies, websites, books. Now, for the purpose of putting together a concise presentation in a time-effective manner, most of the citations that you'll see written on the screen are culled out of Wikipedia, the website, and the pictures from Wikimedia Commons. Now, keep in mind that in many cases, you have to know what to look for and what to find before you find it. What's being said here is this is not a raking agglomeration of Wikipedia quotes and pictures. The quotes and pictures are to refer to larger bodies of knowledge. This is a very skeletal chronology, and there's a blueprint that needs to flow. The quotes were picked out, the pictures were picked out, and we're going to keep on moving. Now, regarding David Schoenbrunn, there's a book that he published, America Inside Out, a book that he wrote. And in that book, he stands face to face with Charles de Gaulle. Now, what I'm referring to here, in some ways, has to do, of course, respectfully, to Mr. Schoenbrunn and to de Gaulle. But there is a significance of, I guess, the aura of what was between them that a lot of the blueprint for this film was put together. Now, of course, looking at the book altogether, America Inside Out, and some of the photos inside of it, it leads you to wonder, there were a lot of moments in time where he had special interviews with special people, well-known, prominent persons and leaders. With the advent of some of the technologies that we have out today, live streaming, webcam, generally speaking, for professionals in the press, 30, 40 years ago, what were moments in time were sometimes defined by the fact that they had a face-to-face meeting. But some of those face-to-face meetings, as just explained, could have been accomplished in terms of their objective through the use of technology. Some of the works cited in this film include a PDF put together by OAS on the exploitation of the Central American children in Guatemala, a book by Jeremy Jeffries, Hell's Cartel, There's also background just over the years from helpful human trafficking and exploitation prevention websites, similar organizations. We do have at least one verbatim statistic from one of those organizations. Google's online translation service, website, technology, platform, however you want to put it, was helpful in translating some of the content that, for instance, was initially made available in German, maybe one or two other languages. So we're going to start off by tumult in the 1920s. There were events involving tens of thousands of people at a time in the 1920s. And what we mean is an event that circumscribed a mass of people. For example, moving a mass of people by a legal order from one place to the next. What you see here, translated from the German, are French troops in an area called the Ruhr. Now, we say area, we write Ruhr. There's a lot of knowledge and information that has to do with the Ruhr area and its history. Alright, so in the early 20s, combining content from Hell's Cartel and Wikipedia, we kind of put together a picture of what went on from about 1921 on to 1923, having to do with the war especially. Late 1922, let's say sometime around December, Germany evidently defaulted on reparations to France and Belgium. The following January, 70,000 French and Belgian troops were sent across the border into the Ruhr. The German government responded by suspending reparations entirely, engaging in passive resistance as well. Apparently the move enraged the French. Cutting the region off from the rest of Germany, they imprisoned or deported over 40,000 civil servants, police, railway men, and other local officials. Their supposed infraction. When low-level sabotage and minor acts of terrorism occurred, the French retaliated, cheating, taxes, taking, and massive fines. So that's what the Hell's Cartel had to say. Now, 1921, French and Belgian troops occupied the Duisburg and Dusseldorf on 8th March. 1923, January, the occupation was extended from Duisburg to the rest of the Ruhr. Alright, basic understanding of the location of the Ruhr, as you can see, the area in the dark red here, over towards the western area. Then we're going to go ahead and move on to the Nazi era of the 1930s and 1940s. Now, if you studied history, and many historians will tell you that this concept, or the concepts involved with Nazism, were in existence well before 1930. Now, again, for the purposes of this movie, we're going to kind of get to the point and the path so that we can draw our contrast and bring out the importance of technology. So this upcoming section here discusses what's commonly referred to as Nazi war crimes. There may be instances in the respective era and region where not all violence was just perpetrated by Nazis. However, what we're trying to illustrate is the value of communication. Those details are not going to be gone into in this film. So, one of a selection of concepts, terminology, philosophies, however you want to put it, however it's fitting as a description. We put together a few of them. We're going to leave some of the material on the screen for readers and viewers to view. At one point, Nazi policies divided the population into two categories: national comrades and community aliens. National comrades, those who belong to the Volksgemeinschaft. As far as community aliens, those referred to those who did not. Now, it's pretty logical what follows in terms of which group pretty much got the brunt of force activity in terms of disciplinary actions. Although here in the United States, let's say today, post year 2000, post the mid 1970s, although the term Holocaust generally refers to systematic mass murder, one of the things that is brought out in this film is that the unmentioned or undesirable, that encompass a range of groups, all of whom, or many of whom, were affected in that era. So we're going to talk a little bit about the Romani. Romani were deported to the ghettos. So, when you hear about the numerous ghettos, for example, to give you an example of a ghetto, Warsaw Ghetto, this sort of picture what was just said. So when you look at footage and who was in those ghettos, there were Romani in them. Some of them, the Romani, were deported to what they call the prison camps, death camps, extermination camps, whatever is applicable. Now, estimates of the Romani death toll in World War II, according to our source here, range from 220,000 to 1,500,000. Now, those numbers right there are enough to have a genocide, not counting anybody else. What you have here is a picture of what's described here as deportation of Sinti and Roma. Towards the center of the picture is what it looks like. You have the Sinti and the Roma, mostly children. It looks like a few women and maybe one or two men are being rounded up. You've got the soldiers in the outskirts. And if the picture tells the story, eventually the group in the middle gets carried off to some place. This particular picture evidently took place in Asperg. Asperg, if you look it up, it's usually going to show that it is a location in Germany. Now, this picture was taken in 1940. There may be viewers that were alive when this picture was taken. So, in some ways, yes, this might be over 70, 75 years ago. However, in other ways, it wasn't that long ago. Now, this is another picture of Roma in Germany in the 1930s. Now, as you can see, this is sort of a microcosm of a utopian setting, which is still pretty much consistent on up until today. There were other groups and people affected. So we have a list of them here. Not all of them, but some of them. Slavs. The Nazi Revolution was broader than just the Holocaust. Its second goal was to eliminate Slavs from Central and Eastern Europe and to create a unified areas. We'll get into what Lebensraum means a little bit later. Ukrainians. Between 1941 and 45, approximately 3 million Ukrainians and other Gentiles were killed as a part of Nazi extermination policies in present-day Ukraine. Soviet POWs, prisoners of war, 2.8 million. Demise by starvation, exposure, and execution over a span of time less than a year. That's a staggering number, 2.8 million. We kind of put two concepts here that go hand in hand. Eugenics, okay, that word is a little bit more popular in the English language lexicon than its longer word. The longer word has to do with what they call hereditary health course. That is a stab at what it really sounds like. Now, you had the eugenics policy, which essentially was the philosophy of exterminating or sterilizing, doing something with those with disabilities other than just letting them lead normal lives. The hereditary health courts were introduced into the Reich by the law for the prevention of hereditary offspring. They decided to go forward with, as taken and translated from the German source, in outwardly right-shaped procedures on forced sterilization of mentally and physically handicapped people, patients of psychiatric nursing homes, as well as alcoholic patients. Many of the victims of the persecution and violence not elucidated, not really discussed too much in this film, also include political opposition, foreigners, enemy nationals, open dissidents, Italian nationals, non-Europeans, with the two subgroups indicated. There was something called Action T4. This is where experimental gas vans, you put the gas cylinders in a sealed trunk compartment, was used to kill mental care clients. We bring that up because it seems to have an overflow with the eugenics. Now, we also have what they call the mobile killing units. Numerous loss of life is blamed on them, especially in the 1930s. You had the Nuremberg Laws of 1935, law for the protection of German blood and German honor. Now, the Lebensraum, this refers to the German concept of living space, according to the source. Now, just what they mean by German concept, well, Germany has been around a long time. In that long, long timeline, you had I guess you can say the height of violence of the Nazi era in the 1930s, and that spanned just before the middle 1940s. So, the context here, the framework is, for the most part, referring to that post-1920 era. Now, if you actually do the research on the term, it might go maybe even a full century earlier than that. The section of the movie that we're in has to do with the Nazi era of the 1930s and 1940s. That's pretty much the framework, and this is what it relates to. We're not trying to delve into the details of the psychology and the philosophy of Lebensraum as an ancient word. There were pogroms, for example, pogrom of 1938, 30,000 were sent to concentration camps. We're now going to go ahead and discuss what's called the Holocaust. We're not going to get into when exactly it got started, when exactly it ended. We're going to stay away again from graphic details, philosophical, psychological details. We're just trying to cover key concepts here. September of 1941, not too far from Kiev. Kiev being historically known city with a very long history. There occurred an event in a ravine. Without going into too much detail, essentially what happened is groups were led into the ravine, forced to lie down, and the unspeakable happened. And this happened over and over again until about 30,000 were killed in a 2-day period. Now you had, in the ghettos that were established by the Nazis, you had uprisings that occurred. And you also had what was the result of the uprising, or those uprisings being crushed. Now just think for a moment, had the conditions of the ghetto, much like you see schoolyard fights being posted onto YouTube or Facebook. They get on there, and then within about 5 minutes, millions of viewers have seen it. Now, had the conditions of the Reverend ghettos back in the 1930s and 40s then put on social media like Facebook or YouTube. Let us think for a minute what the consequence might have been. Now, some of the ghetto uprisings were as recent as 1942. Now, bringing that up because just like the Roma that were being rounded up and put in the back of trucks and taken off to somewhere to have something done with them. Within the next few minutes, you're going to see a couple of pictures of some of the abhorrent conditions that were taking place in these ghettos in 1942. 1942 is known for a very famous film. Those that were alive and old enough or young enough to enjoy the film back then probably remember. Now, back at that very moment in time when they were in the theater watching the film, were they fully aware of some of the conditions in some of the ghettos? Now, by the spring of 1944, up to 6,000 people were being gassed every day at Auschwitz. So we're going to have a picture of the entry gate to Auschwitz in just a moment. And of course, we ask, would that have gone on had social media been present and covered the event? It's going back 70 years, but just what if we had that same kind of quick turnaround time of filming, uploading, and put on social media for millions to view the way we have today, back then, 70, 80 years ago. And we're going to cover camps of misery. So we chose the word misery as a broad term to cover the numerous camps and the different kinds of camps that were being utilized, essentially, by the Nazis back in the 1930s and 1940s. Not stating every statistic here, there's one or two particular that might be of interest to be pointed out. In 1942, 6 large camps that were built in Poland, as it says here, solely for mass killing, those might be more popularly known. Yet, it is estimated Germans established 15,000 camps and sub-camps in the occupied countries, mostly in Eastern Europe. A study conducted in 2012 established that in Berlin alone, Berlin, as far as we know, a city in Germany, in Berlin alone there were 3,000 camps of various functions. 3,000 camps. Another 1,300 were in Hamburg. There were the extermination camps. Extermination and concentration camps. Death camps, as they might be known. You see, we have a list of some of the well-known camps. This is a picture of the entry to Auschwitz. Now, it's pretty evident that this is a more recent picture. Now, when we say in the name of medical experiments in science, what's being talked about here is in some of these facilities or camps, medical experiments and science were phrases used as the banner to refer to this banner that certain atrocities that went on were channeled up underneath those banners and phrases. So, for example, a medical experiment might involve performing some strange type of operation that was very, very risky to some children. In the name of science, might refer to doing some kind of dissection or something that ordinarily shouldn't be done by today's humane standards. From here on, the next few minutes are a few names which are going to be covered as they are pertinent to the 1930s and 1940s. He worked in Auschwitz. His experiments, we're not even going to discuss. They're up here on the screen. There are several other names that are presented here. Most of these are self-explanatory. What will be said here are the pieces of information perhaps most pertinent to what we're trying to drive across here. Okay, in 1929, from that point, over a course of about 15 or 16 years, was the development of what they call the SS from a mere, this is a quote here, mere 290-man battalion into a 1 million strong paramilitary group. Okay, so we're looking at that 15 or 16 years, and we're saying, why wasn't that momentum checked the way that momentum could be checked now through the course of, or through the use of technology? Among other quotes, it was in the German interest to discover as many ethnic groups in the East and splinter them as much as possible. So this is a quote that the Reichsfuhrer SS said. Now, chief architect of this, what they called at that time, new plan, the new plan which was coming out in 1941, the final solution, what that corresponds to, as many people know. In a few words, the attempt to exterminate as many people within a certain group to whatever extent that they desired. Deportations, July 1942. Deportations from the Warsaw Ghetto. Over the next 52 days, 300,000 people from Warsaw alone were transported to an extermination camp. That's a quote. There was the architecture as what's being used as the descriptive tool of other quote-unquote decrees, strategies, and plans of oppression and slaying of human beings. Not quoting each one here. They're up on the screen, readily visible for all to see. Reports such as the Verba Wetzlar, had they been made available sooner, along with the types of photos and recordings that we have, or we use today, these could equivocate the theories that the developments after the Verba Wetzlar report was set forth might have been able to take the same route in them being abated or mitigated sooner. The discussion about the Nazis were on Earth essentially with everybody else. They had to eat, transport themselves, and so there were other aspects of business and industry that interfaced with them. There are a few photos here. Instead of including photos of some of the well-known names involved with the Nazi, the photo will show two young men during the 1930s and 1940s. And we considered a photo of the moments immediately following what they call the Lipaja Beach massacre. This is the first young man at the time. Questions arise as to why he perished, or why he really perished. This is not referred to how, such as, okay, he had too many chemicals put in his system. It doesn't refer to the destiny from above that at a certain day and time he was to be taken away. First question refers to what was in the minds of the perpetrators and their intentions. Was larger, sweeping, we're taking people's children and we're doing experiments on them. And if something happens within that large sweep, well, it was within the large sweep. Now, the second young man, obviously, if a picture like this was put on a social media site, it probably, without a shadow of a doubt, actually, gone viral, as they call it, very, very quickly. Usually, when an event like this happens, there's intervention immediately. Another aspect of the picture to point out is there's more than just the boy lying there on the sidewalk or the road or the street. There's also the passerbyers that seem to almost be helpless to be able to improve the situation. In regard to the Beach massacre, a similar thread had the numbers of bodies then circulated into a social media platform. It's very doubtful that it would have continued to go on and go on the way that it did. Now, a picture of actual people lying there or standing there is not going to be included in this film after all. Moving on to other events, let's look at a natural disaster. Avalanches in Peru, 1941 and 1962. About 9,000 humans perished, combining those two events. What was the impact of regions of the world not knowing about the events in terms of the rescue effort? How could others have flown in or boated in to help dig people out of the snow if they didn't know about it? Victimization in Guatemala. Disappearances, quote unquote, is often what is used to describe dimensions, things that happened in Guatemala, as it refers to humans and sometimes especially to young females, let's say between, let's give it an estimate, the ages of 10 and 30. During the Guatemalan Civil War, from 1981 on, at least here in the U.S., these were years of an era of nameness, of living in comfort. We're after the major wars. We have color TVs. We have cars. At the same time, front page news was not necessarily running stories consistently or constantly as to what was going on in Guatemala, where it was easily made known that where it could have easily been made known. As far as 140,000 or 200,000 people perishing, it really wasn't something that was readily apparent from the cover of the local newspaper or local magazine being produced on a daily or weekly or even a monthly basis. The situation in Guatemala, something known as femicide, this is ongoing. According to a 2012 report, 560 women were murdered in that year, and numbers in excess of 600, and moving towards 700 in 2011 and 2010, respectively. Now, the quote here says the exact number is not known. The OAS did a report. The report is on the commercial exploitation of children, especially Central American adolescents in Guatemala. We did a basic translation of some of the key points brought about in the report. There was a visit observation process. 284 establishments were being looked into. Out of the 284 establishments, meaning bars, massage rooms, nightclubs, etc., out of the 284, 197 were observed by investigators to have children involved. Brought to light here is also the network of exploitation. Sometimes just looking for one person as the root problem to everything might not necessarily be the way to get to the root problem. There could quite possibly be an entire network involved in the exploitation. Now you have the political party of Cambodia. There were a number of individuals involved in the manslaughter. There perhaps was an echelon or a hierarchy. Pol Pot said himself, he must accept responsibility because the line was too far to the left and because he didn't keep proper track of what was going on. Similar to running a house. He didn't know what the kids were up to and that he trusted people too much. Now going back to the 1970s and 1980s, it seemed like we didn't always know about what was going on in Cambodia and the areas where the Khmer Rouge were present or active until maybe 10 years later. We, meaning here in the U.S. Genocide area in Bosnia and Herzegovina and Kosovo, that general region. Now there have been slayings in that region for a number of years. A protuberant era is the early to mid-1990s. There were tragedies in the Azerbaijan and Armenia region in the early 1990s. In 1994, there was a genocide in Rwanda, or more safely put, in the Rwanda region. In 2002, atrocities in the Gujarat. Persecution of Rohingya. These are one of the situations that exist that is ongoing. As of November 2016, Myanmar had yet to allow the media and human rights group to enter the persecuted areas. The Rakhine state was termed an information black hole. What would define the reverse of an information black hole? The answer could be information technologies, such as cell phones, pocket camcorders, and video devices capable of live streaming, and then the capacity to upload the footage or the references to those that perhaps wish not to take pictures of actual people, footage of references of the oppression. The human trafficking of Rohingya was a big concern, especially over the last 5 to 10 years. These are some examples of information technologies. Camcorders, as we know, very familiar. Moving on to today, we now have camcorders that literally are about the size or half the size of the average index finger. The course of this film is now being shifted to examples of what information technology has enabled us to see. The events you just saw were pertinent to the United States. Since the mid-1970s, one of the most well-known set of pictures and footage taken during moments that a leader was slain, referencing Egypt or Masr. Regards Anwar Sadat. On a broad and open spectrum of events, occasions where a huge number of photos are taken are events like the Olympics, large soccer matches. These take place in Europe, South America. Here in the U.S., we have the World Series, we have the Super Bowl. This brings out that information technology is present. The cameras and the camcorders, they are here. If only some of these IT tools could be used more in the way of the prevention of atrocities. The section here deals with Bluetooth and virtual reality technologies. These technologies have the potential to drastically affect the way that we live and what we live in. In summary, you can already see the impact of Google Glasses, for instance. Movie watching, board meetings, watching television, listening to your doctor. All of those situations or scenarios is going to change in terms of how they're going about. Here in 2017, there are three major situations that exist in the world today that need a solution. One of these is the abuse of children right here on U.S. soil. What you're looking at here is a quick run through of some of the abuses going on in other areas of the world. It is asked, what if? Referring to certain situations that have happened, certain disasters that have happened over the past 50 or so years. Notice, where communication abilities is the least, terrorist victimization is the most. When unprincipled acts of violence are carried on out of control, that failure has to be stopped. The overarch of justice being administered correctly maintains. Some events involving bloodshed that have taken place in the last 50 or 100 years have already been explained well over 1,000 years ago. It has come to the attention of the public that the picture-taking and filmmaking capacities of cellular phones and other now easy-to-get inexpensive devices are being used for the wrong purposes at very alarming rates. 22 million images and videos of suspected child abuse in a victim identification program. This is in 2013. More than a 5,000% increase from 2007. A number like a 5,000% increase over a course of 6 years almost doesn't make any sense. Pretty much the only place where a 5,000% increase of anything could take place would have to be in something like unencumbered child abuse images. There is a message that is in this film. Now, this is not what this entire film is about. However, one of the messages is, if you are using cell phones, smartphones, mini camcorders, other devices, and footage-taking capacity to film abuse of children, and then upload the footage and pictures onto the internet, to stop that activity immediately. We looked at the abuse of children that took place in staggering proportions during the Nazi era of the 1930s and 1940s. The amount of suffering, neglect, and mistreatment of children throughout Africa suffered have been trafficked through the cruelty of terror groups known as Al-Qaeda and ISIS. American soldier after soldier has fought and died, and all kinds of positions have been developed and filled by those in service to this country so that our borders to the U.S. are safe from intruders. Many comforts here in the U.S. are taken for granted. And yet, in house after house, the very same houses that are protected, are films and photos being taken of child abuse. Now, houses might not be the only place that this is taking place. It might be warehouses. It might be outside in an unknown or rarely used park, who knows? But the point is, unspeakable activities have been taking place inside of these borders. Some of these actions of the child abuse being done on nice, comfortable U.S. soil are some of the very same actions that are reported to have been done in the concentration camps, done by ISIS in the past 5 years, done in dark jungles of Africa in the past 20 years, and done in Bosnia and Herzegovina in the early and middle 1990s. And to make matters worse, perpetrators are using the very same technology that could have been used to help stop abuse, to facilitate abuse, filming and uploading loathsome footage in the shadowy spots on the internet. We want to encourage the continued development of technology and its often precursor, encouraging education and seeking knowledge. Please use technology the right way.